was to tell you about the that NASA mission that's been coming recently.
Yeah.
So you can probably even put like we don't have to react to anything like that, but anyone listening to us here, like you can look into yourself. It's called Clipper. One of the coolest things that I've heard of for a while. I knew about this moon of Jupiter for a while, and it's basically meant to be one of like two, I think, moons. There's Europa on one of Saturn's moons that's also a really good candidate.
Right.
But this moon on Jupiter, basically, it orbits Jupiter, but it's quite far away from the sun, so it's nowhere near what we think a habitable zone is. It's not getting enough heat from the sun to have liquid water. It's meant to be impossible, basically. But what they found is that what this moon is doing, as it's orbiting Jupiter on this, it's not on like a circular orbit. It's on I think it's elliptical orbit. It's on a weird orbit. It's on an angled orbit. So at some point it's coming closer to Jupiter, then it's going further away. And as it does that, it's being like squeezed and compressed by the gravity of Jupiter. And that is generating this friction inside it that actually gives it a heat source, like a core that's actually warm, like a magma core, like basically what Earth has as well. So what they think this moon is doing is it has like the hot core in the middle, then it has liquid water, and then an ice crust around the outside, a kilometer or 2 kilometers of ice, but then liquid water underneath it. And because Jupiter is like compressing the thing so much, there's all this energy that's in the moon. And it's getting all this radiation from Jupiter as well, which they think as the radiation hits the ice, it's sending all these complex molecules into the water. So that's like the perfect breeding ground for life. Better than what we had here. We had like geothermal vents at the base of the ocean that were giving, rise to complex molecules. And that's how they think life formed on Earth. This thing has everything we have, if not more. And it's got more stability than we have here as well, because that water's been like undisturbed for ages. So imagine it, you got like more water than Earth has underneath this ice crust on this moon, and then every type of temperature gradient you can imagine for the water, from freezing to boiling. So whatever you think the perfect conditions for life are, this moon has it, and it's had it in a stable form for billions of years. How sick is that?
So
There could be anything, man.
So what you're telling me is that there might be life. Might be.
I'd say
there's
like,
probably life somewhere.
There's probably almost certainly life somewhere. We don't know how. Let's put it this way, right? If there is life on this moon, there is life everywhere. Every single way you can think of that there could be, it would be. Because what are the odds that two places in our own solar system evolved life separately? Like, it must just be so common. So this would be really cool. And what they're doing right now is like what they found on this, using the Hubble telescope, they found that this moon, because there's all this pressure building underneath the ice, every so often the ice will crack and the geyser will spat out water and it'll shoot out hundreds of meters from the moon vertically out into outer space. So what they're doing with this probe, it's going to like dip in to go around this moon and try and catch liquid that's coming out of one of these geysers. And it's going to then be able to analyze what the molecules are and if it's life or not. So we will know within a few years if there's bacterial life in this water.
So they've sent this thing already, and it has the ability to check to the molecules.
Yeah, the engineering of this thing is absolutely crazy. The way I watched a video on last night, way over my head, but like the proper engineering that's gone into this, it's so fucking wild to me, man. Like, us humans are such insanely genius like apes, man. It's crazy what we do with science and technology. It's insane. So this thing can basically like dip in, collect this water, and then like for like ionizing it can find out what exact chemical compounds are in that water. So it can split CO2, hydrogen, and it can find basically life, or at least all the ingredients for life. Would be able to tell basically pretty shortly if there's life in our solar system elsewhere besides Earth. And I think that's absolutely sick.
That is pretty cool. I think that is cool. I don't know if I care that much though anymore. I'm sort of like, if we find like molecule life, I'm like, all right.
Well, that's the thing, right? What this probe can find out is if there's life in there. It won't tell you if it's only single cellular or not. We can't tell that.
Yeah.
But let's imagine you have a stable environment underneath this ice, and you've had it for billions of years. There could be anything in there. There could be any kind of life form in that water. Think about how wild our oceans have been over the last hundreds of millions of years. All the different type of species that have existed, from megalodons to like freaking crabs to octopus. All these things you can think of could be this own moon's version of these life forms in that water.
It would be cool to know if there was like, I don't know, like creatures like on a different planet. Do you think they would like take a humanistic like looking form, or do you think they would just be some random fucking shit?
I think life evolves to fill a niche. So all of our physiological structures, that's why every animal that you see, if you know what habitat it comes from, you can almost see how it's evolved to take over that habitat. That's niche filling, basically. That's how we evolve. So whatever the niche is for here, I don't think they'll have eyes they can see because it would be pitch black in there. I can't imagine it being a light source. But I have no idea. I think the scariest thing is I don't think there's any limits on how big life could get in that water source because it's just got so much water. It's way more water than Earth has. There's no
Is this
land
moon
mass.
bigger than ours?
It's
Our
roughly
Earth?
the size of our moon, I think it is. I'm pretty sure it's roughly the size of our moon. But it's all water. There's no land mass. And it's deeper water the whole way through. So there's more liquid water on this moon, I think, than Earth.
Yeah, but don't they say that if things get too big and there's not enough things for that big thing to eat, they sort of just don't get that big anymore?
There's like a limit to how big something can get. And yeah, that is true. That's why like the top predator has to have like imbalance with the rest of nature. But I have no idea how big things could be here. They could be as big as megalodons and other things. Have you seen the prehistoric age and how big they think something's got? You can put up right now like how big prehistoric sharks were compared to our current sharks. It is insane.
I've seen that, but like they were that big, so then they must have had something big enough to feed on, right?
Yeah.
At the time. So then I assume that the things that they were eating, there was just none of it anymore, right?
Well, the idea is that we had a calamity. We had a meteoric strike here, and I think that depleted like the oxygen in the water and stuff like that. There's all these sort of things that I think happened. There was mass extinction events. All our megafauna died roughly 10 to 20,000 years ago, just about. And they think it was the Younger Dryas impact. I don't know if you've heard Graham Hancock talk about it.
I hear about it all the time.
Yeah, because it's about the deoxygenization of the waters and the rest of that, and that killed all the bigger things, and that's why we have like pushy tiny little sharks now instead of like the big ones we used to have. Like you add more oxygen, more carbon to the water, things get bigger, and yeah, I mean you could bring that back out again with enough time and the right conditions. And I have just no idea what conditions there might be underneath this ice.
Do you think that the world would just be fucked if megalodons were still around? Like it'd just be wild, right?
What if dinosaurs were still around, man?
Yeah.
How crazy would that be? Like, what, you want to go for a hike? Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, imagine running into like velociraptors or some shit on a hike. That would just be absolutely heinous.
Yeah, well, that's what I love about the old stories, like you know, about dragons and stuff like that. The idea is that maybe there was something that we haven't found the remains of yet. We think that these dinosaur remains. What if dragons were around? What if they say dinosaurs were still around, and you had some that like particularly like the taste of human meat? Imagine being a knight, thinking it's your role, your duty to go and try and kill that dragon or like that dinosaur. That'd be freaking madness. Imagine getting a few of your boys together. You're like, all right, now this T-Rex has just been terrorizing this town, man. We need to take him out. You got your fucking armor and your swords and shit, and you're like, let's take him on. You got this fucking 4-story tall freaking reptile thing that eats people.
Yeah, like, do they?
Madness.
Is there like sort of like timeline where dragons actually came from, like where that sort of story came from?
Man, that could be its own episode. I think there's like up until like is it 1800s in the encyclopedia there was a different definition for there was no definition for dinosaurs. I think up until 1800s I think they were just referred to as dragons. Whenever they found like the bones and the remains, I think that they would just classify them as dragon remains. You can find on Webster's dictionary when the word dinosaur became a thing. I don't think it was too long ago. I think it's like the 1800s or something like that. Yeah, have a look at that. I've seen someone do a video on this. But the crazy thing about this moon for me as well is like imagine for a second that like intelligent life evolves here. It's some sort of mermaid-esque creature. What would it think the universe is? It would have this body of water that it exists in, and then it would hit like, imagine the way we see the ground underneath our feet. That is how this intelligent creature would see the sky above it. It would just be a permanent wall. It would think that the universe was only the body of water that it was in. How could it ever get through a kilometer more of ice above it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Imagine thinking that like, the whole universe is like just your one water body that you're in. That'd be crazy. Imagine finding out. What if we somehow managed to contact it? And it's like, what the fuck do you mean there's something above the sky? The sky is solid. It's ice. And we find a way to communicate to this life form that there's a whole fucking universe just outside of their ice cap.
The thing is, though,
Crazy.
is that, like, if there was something that big underneath there, why couldn't it break the ice? Like,
It's over a kilometer, man.
a kilometer.
And remember, the conditions are so cold on the outside of this planet because there's no sunlight. It's just so hard frozen ice.
So they would, even if you smacked up against it, you don't.
Because you got the ice around the outside and then you get being squeezed and compressed, that's generating the heat, and the water will sometimes just explode out. for like a little crack, and the crack immediately seizes up over again.
Yeah, right.
So there's no way. We have to somehow get electricity in its own weird water version of electricity, a massive fucking drill, and then we'll have to drill through its ice. It would be crazy.
It would be pretty nuts.
It would be so nuts, man. But we could drill down. We could probably drill down if there's a way to do it, and then find a way to communicate to these things. That would just be the craziest thing for me if we could do that.
I don't think that if there's something there, like if it is a fish-like creature, there's, you know, probably it's debatable where anything would even be sentient like that. Like consciousness is just a weird thing.
Consciousness is very weird. Consciousness is incredibly weird when you think that every living creature that reaches some level of complexity has some form of consciousness. Like you can see in if you have cats or dogs as pets, like you know it's something to exist as them. You know that they're aware in some way of what existence is. Like there's some level of consciousness there. Consciousness just seems to scale with complexity. So if you leave an ecosystem with enough time to build up enough complexity, I think there's probably more argument to say it would have a level of consciousness to it. Like first principles consciousness is just like observe your world, interact with it, survive. That's like primitive forms of consciousness, and we still have that. That's what your fight or flight response is. That's what, you know, pattern recognition is. What we humans have is like this, which I've always thought is one of the weirdest things in the world. We have this jump in conscious evolution that stops inciting us to reproduce or even stay alive. We start committing suicide through the torture of our consciousness. It's so hard to think that it's an evolutionary response that, you know, we've gotten so conscious that we've stopped reproducing, we start killing ourselves. Explain to me how that's evolutionary. We don't reproduce anymore. That's like evolution failed.
Do you know what's interesting
so weird
that you say that though is that there was some works that got done at the zoo recently, and they have to be so careful when they do the works and when they do the drilling, because the people doing the works, the construction works, the vibrations and the sounds are so unsettling, and it messes with the animals so badly that they commit suicide.
Jesus, it stresses them out so much.
Yeah.
Bloody hell, that is wild.
So it does happen.
Yeah.
Like I never thought that animals would commit suicide,
Yeah.
something like that. But if you put those vibrations in the ground when you're drilling or doing groundworks, the elephants apparently can like sense that from like 18 kilometers away.
And it just causes them so much grief.
Yeah.
That's a wild thing as well, that like, you know, how are our bodies being fucked with in ways that we can't tell? And is that why we have started doing it? Maybe we're just living so far away from nature that we're like poisoning ourselves. And I think that's probably some element of that happening.
Maybe. I actually really like the idea of like ancient Rome and like living like the ancient Romans. Like obviously there's stuff that's just fucked about that, but it feels like a more traditional human existence to some extent. Obviously it's like completely outside of the realms of what humans evolved from, but I like that old school people had to talk to each other and communicate in person, and you sort of walked around the town and stuff, and I don't know, it was just a different vibe.
I actually saw a crazy I don't know if you've ever seen them before, but those videos that show you how something changes over time, I just love watching those. There was one that shows like how couples meet each other, and it starts from like the 1940s.
Oh yeah, I saw this. Yeah,
and it used to be like, you know, 20% friends, 10% work, all these things, and now it's like from 2002 onwards, it's like 75% met online. And you're like, there's something wrong about that. I think there's something not quite right about it. You know, it's not real. It's digitized. It's a hologram. It's this projection of human interaction. It's the way you just said it. Like you long for the days of Rome where it was like you met in big colosseums, you had conversations. Like how do you replace that with just a message board? How do you really replace that with a chat? As much as like we love people interacting with our chat, like you can't really replace what it's like coming into like an auditorium and seeing people really have the conversation.
It is different. There's this loss of like theater when people chat and stuff as well. Like I feel from what my understanding of ancient Rome, there was a big thing about going to places, and public speaking was such an art form and such a skill.
Yeah.
Where now it's not really that big of a skill. You sort of need to be able to speak. Say if you're doing online stuff, this is kind of like the public speaking that you would do, because people all across the world can watch you, but it's not the same as standing in front of the crowd and speaking to people. That's such
guarantee you it's not, because like we do this like, all the time, and like, it took me a while to get comfortable with the podcast and this sort of format of speaking. But when I had to do the actual presentation like a few months ago, man, there was something so terrifying and so paralyzing about that. And I knew what I was talking about. I even knew the people I was talking to. It was like 200 people in that room, and I just like almost blacked out. I can't remember what the experience was like, my brain went somewhere else. People are like, oh, you did a good job. I'm like, I don't remember saying a single word. I can't even like bring up the memory of it, bro. Like that's how much I just blanked.
Is this for that AI stuff
Yeah.
that you did? Do you want to tell the chat what you actually did?
Yeah, well, I was looking into, and it's actually gotten worse than when I did it as well. But basically, my whole concept was that I was worried that we're reaching a tipping point, like a mass recession, which is just 10%, just 10% of labor replacement with AI. Doesn't have to be much more than that. 10%, you're in a great recession, basically. So I talked about how self-driving vehicles were going to take away taxi drivers, Uber drivers, truck drivers will lose their jobs, and how even some media content creators could lose their jobs. And that's actually a great pivot. I wanted to ask you if you heard about this. Apparently in Japan, like the original voice actors for Dragon Ball Z, for Goku and the rest, apparently they've been getting really fed up with Western media's insertion of woke ideology. Because what happens is when they need Western media to audio dub and voice dub, they keep changing the actual written like scripts and stuff like that and adding Western woke ideology into it. And they're being really fed up with it. And apparently they've turned to AI now, and they're going to use AI to completely do the voices of like Goku and all those other people. I think you said Goku's voice actors passed away, I think. Is he?
No.
The original?
So no. Goku's voice actor is a female.
Female?
In Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, she hasn't passed away, I don't think.
So if you
it
want to
was
put
Akira Toriyama
Yeah.
who made Dragon Ball.
put this up here and just put Dragon Ball Z voice actor for AI, just put it on the Google, just for yourself as well, just so like.
Okay, 2 seconds. 1 sec. You want me to put the React cam on? Is that what you want?
Even just for just a tool for us, just to make sure I'm like discussing this correctly.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
so what do you want me to search?
Just Dragon Ball Z AI voice actor. Because apparently they've just signed a deal recently, which is going to be like to allow them to use her voice then that she did for it.
Right.
To do the actual AI. Yeah, Dragon Ball Z's most famous voice gets English AI transformation. So the actual like incentive behind them doing this is that they weren't appreciating Western cultures like changing of the messaging, changing of the script during the voice translation.
Right.
So you're gonna get AI to do it instead.
Yeah, well, they've always sort of changed scripts ever since, like even shows like Yu Yu Hakusho, which is like a really old school anime that's manga and an anime, and it's just a fantastic show. Some of the things they did translate the way that it comes across because it doesn't sound right all the time, like the way that things are said, but that's just more of like the way that they would say something, and it also adds to the person's character a little bit as well. So that translation of sometimes like the way things are said is necessary, but putting woke ideology into it, that's where it starts to branch away from just a translation thing to make it fit Western audience a bit better.
I don't know if you're aware of like the debacle of Assassin's Creed that's really pissed off Japanese media, where Ubisoft came in and put the black samurai as the face of
yeah.
So that's actually leading to a lot of this. There's like a really big rift between like Hollywood and Western media and Japanese media, because they took that as such an insult. Do you see that they even put like images on there about like freaking the Bent Tower, which is meant to be a symbol of the Hiroshima bomb?